Today we will talk about the terrible airline accident with Concorde, Air France Flight 4590. Stay until the end, like, share, and subscribe. Welcome on board and fasten your seatbelt for landing. It was July 25, 2000. The sky over Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris was clear, with the European summer bringing warmth and a seemingly calm atmosphere. On the runway, the Concorde registered FBDSC, the ultimate symbol of supersonic commercial aviation, was preparing for another Atlantic crossing. Flight AF 4590, operated by Air France, would carry 100 passengers, mostly German tourists, and 9 crew members to New York. It was a special flight. Many passengers planned to board a luxury cruise after landing in the United States. The Concorde always drew attention. Its slender, aerodynamic fuselage, delta wings, and roaring engines made it look more like a fighter jet than a passenger plane. Since entering service in the 1970s, it had represented the pinnacle of aerospace technology, Mach 2 speed, twice the speed of sound. But on that day, the promise of speed met tragedy. At 4:43 p.m. local time, AF 4590 lined up on runway 26R. On board, Captain Christian Marty, a former fighter pilot, and First Officer Jean Marcotte kept their eyes on the instruments. Everything appeared normal. The Rolls-Royce/Snecma Olympus 593 engines roared to life, and the aircraft began its takeoff roll. However, at 200 kilometers per hour, a sudden explosion changed everything. The air traffic controller heard the blast and saw flames erupting beneath the left wing. Unknown to the crew, just moments earlier, a Continental Airlines DC-10 that had taken off had dropped a small strip of titanium onto the runway. As the Concorde rolled over it, the number 2 tire on the left landing gear struck the metal, bursting instantly. Shards of rubber flew violently and struck the underside of the left wing, where fuel tank number 5 was located. The impact created a structural shock strong enough to rupture the tank. Pressurized fuel began leaking rapidly. A second later, a spark, likely from an electrical short or friction from the debris, ignited the spilled fuel. Flames engulfed the left wing. Ground control issued a warning. Air France 4590, you have flames behind you. But with engines at full power and the aircraft traveling above V1 speed, the point of no return, aborting the takeoff was no longer an option. The Concorde lifted off with difficulty, swaying laterally. Engine number 2 lost thrust, and number 1 was partially affected. With 2 of its 4 engines compromised and the fire spreading, the jet struggled to gain altitude. The pilots attempted a left turn, aiming for an emergency landing at nearby Le Bourget Airport. But the aircraft could not pick up enough speed. The left wing, weakened by the intense heat, began losing lift. Inside the cabin, tension must have been mounting. The flight crew stayed in contact with air traffic control, while passengers likely remained unaware of the full severity of the situation. Witnesses on the ground saw the plane ablaze, leaving a trail of black smoke and flying dangerously low. Some took photographs and recorded the aircraft's final moments. Less than 2 minutes after takeoff, at 4:45 p.m., the Concorde lost all control. Without sufficient lift and power, it crashed into a hotel in Gonesse, a small town near Paris. The impact was catastrophic. All 109 people on board died instantly. On the ground, for more people perished in the ensuing fire. The world was stunned. The Concorde, long regarded as a safe icon of aviation, had suffered its first and only fatal accident in nearly 30 years of service. The tragedy marked the beginning of the end for commercial supersonic travel. Investigations were launched immediately, involving French and British authorities and international experts. The French BEA, Bureau of Inquiry and Analysis for Civil Aviation Safety, concluded that the chain of events was triggered by the metallic debris left on the runway. The titanium strip, considered unsuitable for the DC-10, had been improperly installed by Continental Airlines during recent maintenance. As a result, the American airline was taken to court in France years later and initially convicted of involuntary manslaughter, although appeals eventually overturned or reduced the verdict. Investigators also found vulnerabilities in the Concorde's design. The proximity of the fuel tanks to the tires, combined with a lack of protection against secondary impacts, contributed to the disaster. After the accident, several modifications were made: reinforced tires, Kevlar linings for the tanks, and other safety enhancements. But public confidence had already been shaken. The CONCORDE was grounded for over a year. It returned to service in November 2001 with all safety upgrades implemented. Yet the Gunness crash, combined with high operating costs, low passenger demand, and the aftermath of the September 11 attacks, led to the aircraft's permanent retirement in 2003. The dream of commercial supersonic flight ended with a sigh of nostalgia and sorrow. Today, CONCORDE aircraft are preserved in museums. Tourists take photos and marvel at the beauty and audacity of its engineering. But in aviation memory, Flight AF 4590 remains a grim reminder. Even the most advanced technological achievements can fall victim to small oversights, whether human or mechanical. A single piece of metal on the runway was enough to seal the fate of a legendary aircraft and 113 lives. In the end, the CONCORDE departed faster than sound, but couldn't outrun the harsh reality that aviation safety depends on every detail. From the tiniest screw to the pilot's decisions, from runway inspections to design resilience. Flight 4590 stands as both a tragedy and a final chapter in the history of supersonic passenger travel.